And I'm going to start by introducing myself. My name is Tom Brown, and I consider myself a friend and supporter of Occupy. Early in October, I went down and volunteered whatever I could do to help, brought some supplies to the Justin Herman Plaza, otherwise called Bradley Manning Plaza camp, food and other things, and I also allowed my home address to be used as a permanent mailing address for the treasurer, who I believe is still the treasurer. So I occasionally get porta potty bills at my home, which I don't pay because I'm just a mail draw. And I go around to a whole bunch of events and I meet these wonderful people and I film them and I put up little videos on YouTube. So there's about 18 Occupy San Francisco events on YouTube that I put up. So that's my contribution to give them as much exposure and credit and recognition as they deserve. One of the occupiers had to cancel last minute, Diana Macasa. She's a wonderful outreach person and specializes in City College of San Francisco public finance for public education issues, and was one of the original Occupy City College occupiers. We're lucky to have Ben Hansell here. He's doing the camera work, I guess, because Molly Fleischman, who's not here, asked me if we could have a video of this wonderful panel discussion, so we're going to try and do that. And one person will be coming, that's Richard Kreidler, but we're going to start. So I'm going to very quickly introduce these three wonderful people, starting with Frank right here. Alphabetical, to make it simple. Frank Bergamaschi. Bergamaschi is a registered California architect. He specializes in residential designs and sustainability. That means things like, I guess, low energy usage in your house. That's the part that you know about. He's been involved in the Occupy movement since October and currently works with the Outreach Working Group. And that's important because all that swag, the buttons and stuff, please check that out at the table there. I think you're asking for a donation. What's the donation for buttons?
We asked for $2, but what we'd really like is for people to wear the buttons, so feel free to take one without a donation if that's more appropriate.
Where are the buttons? I got my button. I got my button, by the way, at the March 1st Occupy the State Building event down there by the State Building, and there was a wonderful table that I think Ben set up, or somebody, or maybe Diana, or both of you. So maybe you did, I don't know. Okay, so Geza. Now, last name, Polony?
Polony, yes.
Polony, Geza Polony is representing Occupy Oakland. So we have San Francisco and Oakland here. He has taught English and critical thinking at De Anza College. He's now, I think, retired from that, and somewhat retired, and is now living in the East Bay. Am I correct about that?
Yes.
And is also active in something you guys should all know and love, which is called the Move to Amend, the organization that's pushing for a 28th amendment to declare that money is not speech. And what's the other?
Corporations are not people.
Thank you. Corporations are not people, money is not speech. I forgot my mantra. So that's a wonderful activity that Occupy supports and amplifies. Craig Rouskey, I got to tell you how I didn't really meet Craig Rouskey, but I saw him behind glass windows of the bank. Was it Wells or Bank?
Bank of America.
Thank you. So I saw this guy behind glass windows at a closed Bank of America in the Excelsior. I think that was January something. January 20th? 7?
Yeah.
That long ago? And that was an Occupy event about stopping foreclosures, and this guy all by himself, there was a whole bunch of his buddies outside, but there was Craig inside looking totally happy and smiling, and he had a sign, and he was trying to communicate with his buddies outside. He didn't know him, I didn't know the buddies, and say that he's there. It was a Saturday, the bank was open, but their front doors were closed because they were afraid of these guys. And he just wanted to talk to the manager, and I believe you were arrested later in that.
I was.
Yes, okay, so that's our panel, oh, someone just arrived. Are you Richard Kreidler?
I am.
See, I have my quick notes here.
Glad.
Yes, Molly Fleischman and I have been exchanging emails frantically today as to who, because she did some of the recruiting and I did as well. Richard Kreidler is a computer software manager and entrepreneur. But he also established, and this is near and dear to my heart, he established the kitchen at the Occupy camp. That would be, I guess, Bradley Manning Plaza and 101 Market as well, right? He established the kitchen and still to this day, is that true, provides food.
I just came from feeding the people that were marching for the young black kid that got shot.
Yes. Oh, you
They have a lot of
provide
people
food. So I'm going to turn this over. These are the stars, and I'm going to go in this direction. So starting with Frank, I'd like each one of you just to speak for no more than 5 minutes or less, because I have questions after that, and these people are going to have questions. Answer the question, why did you get involved in Occupy in the first place? And what does your group, what do you do, or what does your subgroup do, your working group? What do you actually do now? So starting with Frank.
Well, I got involved with Occupy because I think it's probably the last best chance my generation has to get it right. I've kind of looked over my adult life, and I'm very interested in environmental issues, and we've been doing things wrong for quite a while. And when I see the social justice movement that is revolving around wealth, and that has so much to do with environmental issues, it attracted me, and that's really why I went to the Occupy movement. What our group does, the outreach working group, we do things like set up those tables, we leaflet, we have at least 2 hours of leafleting in downtown San Francisco most weekdays. We come to meetings like this, and we're just trying to do outreach and get people to understand what we're about and also to join the movement.
Okay, Richard.
So I haven't had to work for a while, so I was listening to all the terrible things that were happening to our country, and it was really driving me crazy. I didn't have an outlet for it until Occupy came about, so when it did, I was very happy that somebody was going to finally do something about this and not just watch this mess that's been happening to our country unfold. And my main focus now is outreach, exactly this. I met Molly at a shoe repair store in Noe Valley, and I thought this would be a great idea if we could present to you guys. I've also called the arch enemy, the Republican Party of California, because we like to try to talk to them. It's difficult because they don't talk in a straight line. It's very, very hard to get anywhere with these guys, but that's the way it is. So yeah, it just means a lot to me, and I believe that as many writers are saying, and many people's opinion today, this is the greatest chance to make a difference, because what's coming down upon us, I believe, is not going to be pretty, and it's going to be a tough scenario. So towards that end, we just created a big database that we're putting all these facts into, what's happening, so that we can bring them to meetings like this. So I'm real excited about that.
Thank you. Geza.
Similar vein, I remember a song that I used to listen to when I was an adolescent. One of the lines of the song was, "The pills that mother gives you don't do anything at all." You don't remember that?
Jefferson Airplane.
Yeah, that's how I began to
They're
feel
speaking to
about
the gentleman.
Well, exactly. Yeah, but I began to feel, a long time ago, that the centrist Democratic Party was one of those pills that didn't do anything at all. And I was waiting, last summer, I was thinking, why aren't Americans in the street? What is going on? Why are we so silent? And then suddenly, in October, we were in the street. And I joined up very quickly with Occupy Oakland. First came to Occupy San Francisco, actually, with my 16-year-old daughter. And then joined up with Occupy Oakland. And I've been working on several different committees. I started working on a committee called the Local Business Liaison. Began after the encampment started. There was a lot of bad press coming from the Chamber of Commerce and the mayor's office about how bad the bad effect that the encampment was having on local business. So we went out and we canvassed the local businesses and tried to get that information to the Chronicle, and pretty much ignored us. But that was my start, working sort of outreach to the businesses. And I also became the affiliate for Move to Amend, and as was mentioned, we're trying to amend the Constitution. One of many groups that are actually trying to do that. We're the most radical of groups seeking to end corporate personhood. And so had sort of a foot in both camps, both Occupy and Rouskey+Ben, trying to get Occupy on board with that movement as well. Basically, I think I share a sense of outrage with the other people here that our country has just been taken over by corporations. I don't particularly blame the Republican Party. I think it's the whole thing. I feel that I voted for Jimmy Carter. I voted for Clinton. I voted right down the line Democratic. I gave money to some of these people like joined the organizations, and it's worse. 30 years later, it's substantially worse situation than we were in the early 70s when I started voting. So that's why I'm on fire.
Thank you. Craig?
So I started working with Occupy at the end of September, actually because it was, you know, of course, what everyone said is true, but sort of this lead up of a huge economic crisis and people realizing together that, hey, wait, it's not necessarily the government that's bad, it's not our democracy that's bad, it's actually this idea of privatizing everything, hyper-capitalism, that's literally shutting the majority of the people in this country out of participating in government. And so I saw that as an opportunity to get back and actually mobilize around this issue and actually break up the paradigm that has kept people separate. I actually get kind of particular about speaking about the right and the left, because I think what we need to do to create the 99% is bridge those gaps and say, you know what, these issues really aren't right and left. It's really like the 1% or 0.01% versus us, right? And if we can come together and change the paradigm, then we can grow a country that actually can fight against these evils, or whatever you want to call them, these disgusting things. So I started participating because I saw a place for myself in that movement. It's something I've been complaining about for a long time, since I was very young, actually. And the groups I'm working with in OSF, Occupy SF, are the Direct Action Working Group, Occupy SF Housing, and the Occupy SF Labor Solidarity Working Group. So we spend a lot of time organizing around labor struggles, organizing around the housing struggles. For example, last week we reoccupied someone's home in the Bayview, and we're still holding it until Wells Fargo agrees to sell them back the home at the price they sold it to themselves for. And then the direct action stuff, like leading up to our January 20th action, getting arrested in Bank of America, those kinds of things to actually, you know, throw a wedge in the wheel of corporate power and, you know, ultimate authority. So that's what I do.
Well, thank you, Craig. I think I forgot to mention, in the daytime, you're a microbiologist. Is that correct? You actually
molecular immunologist.
Molecular immunologist.
Yeah.
So, what I have a couple of, I hope, thought-provoking questions that are all on your minds to ask all these panelists. And then by around 8:30, we're going to turn it over to the audience to ask whatever questions. So start in your mind accumulating questions as we go along, but I'll try and cover some of the big issues. So, there is, as you guys know, a raging debate amongst occupiers on blogs like Occupy Oakland, and also I discovered Occupy San Diego, about what role there is, if any, for some form of violence as part of the agenda of Occupy. And most of this comes from publicity from Occupy Oakland. We actually have someone from Occupy Oakland here today, Richard, which is good. So what I want to ask, and this is kind of a part philosophical question and also part practical, strategic question. But the question is, on a personal level, because you all have some role in Occupy, what do you think the proper response should be of occupiers to those who advocate violence as an example of diversity of tactics? Diversity of tactics means something other than rallying and occupying and so forth and so on. So what is your personal take on the issue? And we want to start with Craig?
Yeah, can we?
Okay.
So first, before we start this conversation, I think it's really important to note that every Occupy encampment has consent to nonviolence before anything has happened, right? So strong commitment to nonviolence and no property destruction. one of the big issues that we've had in Occupy SF is dealing with the black bloc or autonomous individuals, right? So these people who come to an event that we've organized and act autonomously outside of consensus and do things like destroy a window at Bentley. So it's hard because, like I said earlier, we want to do a good job of enfranchising as many people into this movement, and I really believe that if you exclude people who want to destroy windows, you're doing a disservice to the 99%. These people are part of the 99%. They deserve to be represented and empowered by this movement just as much as anyone else. With that said, you have to act by consensus if you want to participate in OSF, and what that means is respecting the will of the group when they decide to do something that's non-violent or consists of no property destruction. So with that said, I think the overall movement of occupies across the country is to move away from people who actually participate in violent property destruction. And there's different kinds of property destruction, right? Diana Macasa did a really good job actually at the last forum that Tom hosted. And said, the property destruction that was described after J20, January 20th, this Bentley window being broken was huge, but there was like this, what was he, Pennsylvania or Philadelphia, whatever, football coach who had been fired, and people went out to the streets and did $25,000 worth of damage, and that was like a quick highlight. No one's like sitting around talking about that kind of property damage, but a Bentley window at a protest, that's a big deal. So there's kind of like a weird thing there. But I think overall, like I said, the idea is to move away from people who want to act outside of the consensus of the group. So if that means you want to be violent, if you want to, participate in property destruction, then you can't be part of an OSF action, that Occupy SF action that has consented to no property destruction. So creating that division of space and time is really important for us.
Okay. Geza.
I have to say, first of all, I think anytime we introduce the word violence into a discussion of Occupy, we're entering into media territory. That's a word that comes from the media. That discussion was framed by the media. I feel that Occupy is a nonviolent movement. I just came from a demonstration about this boy that was killed a few days ago, Trayvon Martin. That's violence. Setting a trash can on fire, to me, that's not violence. This is stuff that comes from the San Francisco Chronicle. And this entire debate has been framed by mainstream and even liberal media. Violence is what happened in Afghanistan. That's violence. Violence is 25,000 people being killed in the drug wars in Mexico. That's real violence. Breaking a window is not. Or it's, in some sense, it might be violence, but it certainly is nothing compared to the violence that we see every day in the news. Violence against human beings. So I feel that this is a discussion that, and I know it is going on in some occupies, and certainly I'm part of the nonviolent committee within Occupy Oakland, and I keep saying the same thing. We're not violent. I'm not violent. I don't go breaking any windows, and neither does anybody I know. There may be even some infiltrators into the movement who are doing that. I don't know, but it's a minor part of this movement. We're not killing anybody. We're not threatening anybody. If there's some graffiti on walls and broken windows, I'm sorry, but that is not what I would call violence. The second thing I'd like to say is that revolution tends to be violent. Look at the French Revolution. The powers that be don't sit there and watch while those powers are taken away. And we're up against massively armed and wealthy powers in this country. The Russian Revolution didn't happen peacefully. I'm not going to say whether I support that kind of action or not, but I don't think it's realistic to think that we're going to change the corporate structure that owns this country, the fourth branch of government, which is corporations, without a big fight. That's my point.
Thank you, Geza. Richard.
Yes. So, I think there's multiple perspectives on, I don't like to use the word violence either. I think it's civil disobedience is probably more appropriate for the things that have been attributed to Occupy. But I think if you look at it from the other side, if you look at it from the 0.01%, the multinational corporations and the government, they're waiting for anything they can label quote-unquote violence. So they can nail this movement. They have no interest in this movement going anywhere, and I would feel foolhardy to believe that they're just sitting there waiting for us to get our act together, bring all the masses on board, and deal with them. They like their life. If you know that 30 years ago, the 400 richest people in this country are worth $1 trillion. Today, they're worth $40 trillion. If you know that $720 billion was spent by 17,000 police departments to purchase Bradley fighting machines, drones, and the militarization of the police across America, I think you can start to get an idea of what we're up against. And that's why this is so critical. These outreaches like this are so critical to bring people on board so that, number one, they can be educated to the things that have happened. And the statistics are overwhelming. If you look at, if you go to againstcuts.org, and I strongly recommend that you do that, and on the side is a organizer pamphlet, and then there's a PowerPoint. There's a lot of facts there that can help key you in if you don't know on what's happened. So I think we have a hell of a task ahead of ourselves, and I think if we don't get it quickly, it doesn't matter whether you call it Occupy or Schmoccupy. The bottom line is, whatever group becomes aware of what's happening to our country, and God forbid if Rick Sanitarium gets elected, or Mint Raw Money gets elected, which appears like he's going to be the Republican candidate, we need to educate. And as one person told me in the beginning, in late September, early October, they said, "Oh, Richard, it's going to develop organically. You can just relax. It'll all come together over time." I said, "You can't wait," because they're not waiting. And they like what they have. They like those yachts. You know, it's not about the Joneses anymore, beating the Joneses. It's about how much cash you can stack up and how much you have. They don't care about the $10 million homes against the 40 and the $20 million yachts and all that stuff. It's about money. And I even attribute what I'm seeing with the oil companies charging the prices they're charging for gas right now as a way of stacking in the cash. And after the summer season's over, maybe it'll drop, maybe it won't. Maybe we'll keep paying these high prices. But there's no question that the money's accruing. It's going to be against us. And one little other thing about the police I'll share with you is they now have shields that emit a sound that cuts off your larynx and you drop to the ground so you don't get air. Drop to the ground immediately. If a phalanx of police stand together with those shields, they can lay down a whole crowd with just sound. I mean, this is serious, and we need to not be asleep at the switch. And I believe that the Democratic Party in Noe Valley is probably pretty aware of this, and that's probably why you're here. So that's my thoughts.
Excellent. Okay, Frank?
Well, on the question of violence, I think that the violence in the movement is very overblown and very overreported in the press. I'm not sure if that's a conspiracy or if that's the way we sell news in this society. Personally, I'm very much against violence. I agree with everything that Craig said. That really reflects my position. In a kind of a banner article Chris Hedges wrote, and thank you for standing up about attacking the pillars that support the status quo, and to attack those pillars, you take strength away from them. That is, you gather people that are supporting the status quo and you bring them to your side. I think we can only do that if we're nonviolent, and I think that's the most effective way of doing it. Now, if we ever get to armed revolution, something akin to the Russian Revolution, I might change my mind, but right now I don't think we're anywhere close to that.
Yes, great.
So, and I just want to add on to what you said. I think the really important thing to realize is that when police act violently against us, we maintain the moral high ground. I came to this movement knowing, like, I believe in this so strongly that I would actually risk my life for this, which is why it's easy for me to get arrested, you know, whatever. Like, this is that important to me. And I think the way you do that effectively is to lay down when they come and brutalize you. I think acting like anything we could do against the kind of weaponry and authority the police have, and with the militarization of the police, like, that's impossible. We're not going to do it. The only way we're effective is through nonviolence, and anyone who thinks otherwise is young and maybe a little inexperienced, and it's hard because there's an emotional response. The window was broken on January 20th in San Francisco because the cops came and pepper sprayed a line of peaceful protesters that were doing nothing, right? This pepper spray, and people acted out emotionally and broke a window. And for me, like, if you want to do property destruction, no one cared that we breached a lock on a building to reoccupy the empty Cathedral Hill building, for union rights and for workers' rights, those kinds of things. No one really cared about that. What they care about is the window, and that's because it's not strategic, it's not proving a point, it's an emotional response to something. So property destruction is something that can play out either way, as violent or non-violent, or strategic or emotional. Violence, hurting another human or hurting another animal, that's absolutely, in my mind, there's no excuse for that. And it's better that the cops do that to us and we get to say, don't do that. You see what they did? And then we get more people in the street and then we win. So,
speaking of police presence and kind of ambiance of events and all that kind of stuff, and there have been many Occupy events in this city and around. You guys, two of you, right, just came from Geza and Craig from the Trayvon Martin rally.
I think Richard did.
Richard, the three of you will do. Oh, Craig.
I did it.
You did it, okay.
I went out to dinner.
What was on your Well, this is sort of funny because Geza called me, said he'd be late about this thing. He wasn't quite sure what it was. I immediately checked your Facebook page to find out where to confirm it was
nice.
Justin Herman Plaza. So all three of you, because I'm just curious, because I read on your Facebook page that the rally was bring candles and the march would be from Justin Herman Plaza to Civic Center. And I immediately thought back to the old days with Harvey Milk when the candle marches were in the opposite direction, from the Castro to Civic Center in the old days. Now it's going from the end of Market Street in Embarcadero up to Civic Center. I thought that was interesting. But could you characterize how it went? Was it violent? Was there a lot of police? All three of you, starting with Richard?
Well, I get trays of food like this, and I went through 9 of them. So that usually means you're in the hundreds, as far as I know, from serving the food. So there's a lot of people. There was also speakers in Justin Herman Plaza / Bradley Manning Plaza who were very incensed about what's happened. Because from the tape from George Zimmerman, who's a Latino, Zimmerman might fool you, but he was, they took the tape and they augmented it, and it was said, and what they found was that he called the young gentleman coming from 7-Eleven with a pack of Skittles and a drink, non-alcoholic, being that he was young. It's kind of hard to say. Well, it's
what is a
bad.
Skittle? I don't know.
Skittles are candy.
Candy, okay.
What they said was very derogatory. There was an expletive in there and a derogatory name used for people of color. I can't even say it's that bad. So that was ascertained today. And he's not been charged with anything. And this is what it sends to people. I mean, every other time anything like this happened, if it had been reversed, somebody would have gone to jail right away. So there's things like that happening. So it was a well-organized march. And last I saw was when I was packing the food, and everybody walked off, marching up to Union Square. So I can't tell you more than that part. Maybe Jason.
Yeah, I was there before the rally started, and I saw several mothers of young boys who've been killed talking. Very moving to see. I feel that we might be parts of the 99%, but the 99% is not oppressed equally. There are people who are extremely oppressed among the 99%. I don't have it too bad, really, and my daughters don't have it too bad. They don't risk getting shot in the street by some nut with a gun to a large degree. And I feel inclusive as we possibly can, starting with the encampments. It's been difficult in some ways. But to get back to the rally, Oscar Grant's uncle spoke. I'm sure you all know who Oscar Grant is. And he's a very powerful speaker. And he went down, he read a list of names of young black men who had been killed by police. Very, very powerful to see that, to hear that. I also would like to say that I think one of the reasons that this case of Trayvon Martin is galvanizing the country is that it's not an individual occurrence. It's not just some nut with the gun who shot somebody. I think it encapsulates the problem of racism, the problem of rampant gun ownership, the problem of laws that not only enable but promote the usage of guns, the disparity of treatment that the police departments have for black and white people. There's a whole lot of issues that are tied up in this case. I think we're going to see a lot more demonstration around it nationwide. Several people said they were going to get on a plane and go to Florida. I think that's excellent. There's going to be more demonstrations in Florida. I think we need to work with this kind of demonstration, even though it's not directly against the 1%. It's not about financial matters. It's not about banks and foreclosures. It's all part of the same struggle.
And to add to that,
Yes, please.
just one more quick thing, a 2-second fact there. 530,000 people have signed a petition put out by the Martin family, and they're shooting for 1 million within the next day or so. A lot of people are incensed about this.
Actually, just before I left for this event, I looked on the website, they're up to 900 some odd thousand. So they're close to 1 million. That's pretty fast, that's one of them. Okay, I want to change the topic a little bit to how you guys see how you think about how things are organized within your Occupy groups. And the global question is, do you think Occupy San Francisco does things differently in terms of agenda setting, etc., than, for example, Occupy Oakland, or for that matter, any Occupy groups across the country? So maybe you could think about that and comment, starting with Frank.
Well, I'm probably not a good one to start with. I'll keep my comments very short because what I like to involve myself in the working groups, and for that reason I have a limited exposure to the overall organization, which is the GA, or General Assembly. The General Assembly is probably democracy at its messiest, and I have very limited time. I want to put in my time where I feel I can make a difference. So I've kind of excluded myself from most General Assemblies. So what I see is the organization of the working group. We're very much getting our feet underneath ourselves. We very much need help. If any of you all would like to join a working group. And we're working as hard as we can, and sometimes without enough communication with other working groups, with other occupies, but that will all come together in my opinion.
Okay, Richard?
The working groups is the way to go. If you go to occupysf.org, click on the calendar, click on the work groups, I believe, or committees. Not sure, you'll catch it on the top, the tabs. Click on that, and then all the committees are there. If you click on the name of the committee, there's a drop down that explains the purpose of the committee, their function, where they meet. And if you come down and anybody's welcome to any of our meetings. And I think you'll get a good idea from the description which ones you might like to join. But that's the critical thing, because as Frank said, the General Assembly is tough for us, and because anybody's welcome to that as well. So we are a microcosm of San Francisco society, and if you take a slice of San Francisco in any way, it's pretty wild, and anything you can imagine. So we have the same thing, but we're working on getting it together.
I'd like to add just one thing. On the website, the calendar is often out of date, so if you want to get into a working group, what you should do is call one of us or somebody that you know that is an Occupy that has the master phone list that can get a hold of the people that are meeting and make sure that there is a meeting. I can't tell you when I first joined how many times I went to the spot and there was nobody there, and it was a little frustrating. So the best way is to find out off the website what you'd like to do, but then confirm it with somebody by phone.
And we can, I brought some cards with me as well, and I'm glad to my phone number's all over the place anyway, and so you're more than welcome to call me, and I'll share that with anybody that wishes to know. But I really hope that we can make the impact on everybody here that, you may have certain feelings about Occupy one way or the other, but we are doing it. I fed a foreclosure party that Craig mentioned on the weekend, and we had, I think it's 25 people there, Craig. We've stopped foreclosures. I mean, this is what needs to be made known, because if you think about Phil Tang writing to the Attorney General that the 400 foreclosures that he sent in, only 16 of them were done correctly. That means that 386, 14 were done right, 386 were done properly. And it's rampant. I mean, the main thing that I see is that this has been going on for a long time. I think there was a major delta that occurred when Reagan got elected because they wanted a spokesman. They wanted somebody who, like Ronald Reagan, was a spokesman for General Electric Theater, who fell asleep in meetings when the thrifts were falling apart. If you read Inside Job, the book, same small group of writers kept coming in touch with the same 100 people that were just tearing our country apart. And it's just wholesale now. What's happening, and we need to do something. I just hope that you feel willing to come down and talk to some of us. We'd love to talk to you.
Thank you, Geza.
On the issue of communication between Occupy groups and even within Occupy, within one Occupy, it's a very, very interesting subject because there's a lot of instantaneous communication and yet there's a lot of isolation. And I don't really know how to explain that, how to really make sense of it. I was in Sacramento yesterday to lobby about a bill, AJR 22, introduced by Bob Rouskey, about corporate personhood. And two of the other speakers in the assembly were from Occupy Redwood City and Occupy San Jose. I'd never met them before, never heard of them before. We're working on the same issue, corporate personhood. There they were. And there was zero communication between Occupy Redwood City, and I happen to have grown up in Menlo Park, so I should know them, but no communication whatsoever. So at the same time, we've got Twitter, we've got Facebook, all the social media, etc. There still is very little communication. And there's an Occupy in Cincinnati, Austin, Eureka, Santa Rosa, they're everywhere. But there's very little communication among groups. Now what that brings up is that there's no Occupy Central. There's no central hierarchical organization. That's by choice. And I don't think that Occupy would be Occupy if it did have a hierarchical organization. I think it depends on horizontalism, and I think we saw a few weeks ago that Ben Cohen, the founder of Ben and Jerry's Ice Cream, tried to buy off Occupy New York, or Occupy Wall Street in New York, by promising a foundation that would give $300,000 for whatever the needs were, if only they could introduce leaders and make the organization hierarchical. And I think wisely, Occupy Wall Street turned them down. Because it's so easy for people, even well-meaning people, to co-opt the will of the people. It's very easy for that to happen. It's happening over and over again. So I think this movement needs to stay horizontal, not hierarchical. And I don't have the answer to how communication is going to happen better between Occupy Redwood City, Occupy San Jose, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Maybe Craig does.
I have a couple of ideas. So first, in terms of the way Occupy SF is functioning, we have our General Assembly, which is responsible for internal organizing of Occupy SF. So this is where everyone comes together from inside Occupy SF, that community. We have the working groups that function alongside of the GA. And like I said, I'm part of the Direct Action Working Group, Outreach Working Group, whatever. And so there's small consensus decisions made in those groups. They're brought to the GA where ideally everyone who's participating in OSF is at the General Assembly. We all know that that's nearly impossible if you want to have a life outside of work and occupy. So that's kind of where a communication breakdown happens. In San Francisco, we also have these Occupy SF Action Council, which is where external groups plug into Occupy. So what that means is if we're coordinating a mass mobilization around like May Day, for example, or January 20th, our Occupy Wall Street West campaign, right? All of these groups are able to plug in and coordinate. So we have the occupiers sort of at the core, the people who've been organizing with Occupy, saying, okay, come in, how do we plug in, how do we get the community to work together? So I think that's a really good strategy in terms of getting everyone who's plugged in. Now, the really interesting thing about the Action Council is the organizations that are plugging in, unions, nonprofits, whatever, these are organizations that traditionally are very hierarchical. But what's happening in Occupy San Francisco is, though they're part of hierarchical organizations, when they come to Action Council, they leave that at the door. That's mandated, right? That hierarchy does not come in here. So we're still able to grow and utilize the resources these people have. I mean, let's be honest, there's over 4,000 nonprofits in the city of San Francisco. We would be foolish to totally exclude hierarchical organizing, right? We are using hierarchical organizing to get some of the work done. We need to be more organized. That doesn't have to look like hierarchy, but we need to be more organized and streamline communications internally and externally. And on that, I mean, it's happening, right? Already we have these inter-occupy calls where occupiers are talking with each other and planning nationwide mobilizations, right? Or people like me who go and work with Occupy Santa Cruz or Occupy Oakland or Occupy San Francisco, you know, you actually just go out and start working with other people and meet other people and bring them into your organization and you support their organization. So I think, you know, like you said, Geza, the internet and social media has definitely helped in organizing, but it does leave room for a lot of gaps. And if you do work full-time like I do, and then do Occupy full-time on top of that, and then try to have a musician career outside of that, and like, I don't know, maybe date once in a while, you know, it's just really, it becomes increasingly impossible to keep up with everything that's going on in the movement. So streamlining communication is where we're at, and I think there's ways to do that with the internet, with the website, with social media, those kinds of things. It's just a matter of implementing those tools.
Well, thank you. Yes.
Just to add, give a little different perspective, this is how much we don't know about what's happening. Mark Roust is the founder of Occupy Redwood City, and I've been in communication with him, and they started an Occupy in Redwood City. And Jacob Cabrera is one of the founders of Occupy Stanford. And Jay called me yesterday. We're going to meet on Friday because everybody's feeling there is going to be an American spring and that the emotions are kind of just roiling under the surface and waiting to explode. And towards that end, Jay's and my focus, and I'm sure some of the other folks at the table here, structure and organization. We are working hard as we can, you know, the repository we have with all the information, communication between the occupies, all this stuff is going on now. A lot of people are reaching out. Jay told me yesterday that that's his only focus, is to work with people who are focused on structure and organization. So to say a little stuff for you.
And I think the really cool thing is those groups would be really well suited to plug into Action Council and coordinate and get support for their actions too through OSF Action Council, right? And I think that's something a lot of groups, Occupy Bernal, Occupy the Mission, Decolonize the Mission, they're, you know, eventually going to be plugging into Action Council to organize actions. I think it's really important that we just keep communicating with these groups. And Outreach does a really, really awesome job at that. Thank you.
Well, and there's also Occupy CCSF, Occupy, there's two more colleges, I can't
SF
remember.
State.
SF State. And so, I mean, it's happening. It's going on if you're not aware of it.
Well, thank you.